What's going on, everybody? Nathan King here with the Auburn Undercover podcast on the 24/7 Sports Network. We are live on YouTube and Facebook, so welcome into everybody watching us. Hopefully, we've got a lot of interest after Auburn's first fall camp scrimmage. Bringing Christian, Jason, and Mark Murphy here. We were all up at the stadium not an hour and a half ago. Got a lot of good information from Brian Harsin. That was a couple hours after we started getting information from those inside the stadium. And so pretty eventful scrimmage. And I will say maybe the highlight was Brian Harsin arriving to speak with us 4 minutes before his scheduled time, because I think it was a few years ago we waited in there almost an hour, so which is understandable. Don't be focused on us after the scrimmage, of course. But yeah, like Jason, lots of good stuff. We will waste zero time and get right in with the quarterback situation, because that's what everybody wants to talk about. That's what everybody wants to hear about. You wrote about TJ Finley tonight because we continue to hear really good things about TJ Finley. He's been the most accurate guy in camp so far, and he was pretty good tonight too in terms of his overall, not even just the completions and whatnot, but what Brian Harsin talked about was the overall command of the offense, understanding where guys are supposed to be. He seems like he's got that down right now.
Yeah. When Brian Harsin started describing what he's looking for in a quarterback and the things that are important to him, it almost sounded like he was talking about TJ Finley specifically, because he's second year in this system. He knows the system better than anybody else. He's able to get the guys lined up, and we've heard about the leadership side of things from him. And so I think that's something that's been there, but he led them on a couple of scoring drives. That's pretty good throws. I think, a touchdown to Camden Brown, which is a big deal. And obviously throwing it to the freshman right now is probably a pretty good idea no matter where you are. So that's a good thing. But the thing that's just that stands out to me is that, people kind of just threw TJ Finley by the wayside a little bit, after the finish last year. But man, at quarterback, we've seen this time and time again. You never know when it clicks for a guy. You never know when the situation arises. And hey, we're not saying he's going to be the starter. Just saying that I think he's improved. I think he's gotten better, and that's a good thing. If he's not the starter, then that means the quarterback room's in pretty good shape. So I think the first obvious takeaway is that TJ Finley's, I think, improved. He's gotten better, and in turn, that's going to force everybody else in that room to step up a little bit.
The first question here on YouTube, by the way, if y'all have questions, we'll kind of just roll through this thing. We don't really have much of a plan here. Just wanted to get in and jump in. I know everybody's interested to know what happened. Andrew Ackerman says Finley's been more accurate, made better decisions than Calzada. That, not to boil it down too simply, Jason, but the answer's probably been yes.
It sounds like it. We've seen bits and pieces.
Yeah.
We talked about this the other night. When you're standing there watching TJ Finley throw a football, it's pretty. He throws a really good football. He's a guy that looks good standing in the pocket, and scrimmage situations are the first opportunity where you can go, okay, now what happens when you start blitzing and you show them some different looks on defense and you do all those different things. And so I don't know that it's a huge gulf between him and those guys, but I think he's done a good job of delivering the football and doing some of those things and decision making. Again, he's been in this offense a lot longer than everybody else. Zach Calzada did not have a spring practice. Now he was able to be out there. So that's a pretty big thing to have to respond to and come back from. So you would think that a guy like Zach Calzada would take some steps as now you get a scrimmage under your belt, while TJ Finley's had a lot more reps in this offense.
Yeah, Chris DePalma says, late to this, feel like a QB needs to be established a few weeks for the first snap. Yeah, getting into a little bit more of what Harsin talked about with the quarterback situation, just so everything's clear for their plan over the next week. Sunday, as in tomorrow, they'll break down the film, and then Monday the guys have the day off. They'll come back on Tuesday when classes start at the university, and at that point, Harsin said the coaching is not just quarterbacks, everybody. You kind of take that next step in whittling down reps and figuring out situations for guys, whether it's scout team or whatever. But then the second scrimmage is what we've been waiting on to that's going to be the big separation point. That's really when you've got to start figuring things out to the quarterback situation as well. You've got to make sure you're getting things figured out there. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe one of those guys, maybe not so publicly, but one of them gets kind of pushed out of that situation, just so you're, like we talked about on the last podcast, it's difficult. I think you said it, Mark. It's difficult to have three quarterbacks. It's difficult to have a 3-quarterback race throughout the entirety of fall camp. You just don't have enough reps for that. So we have a question here about Camden Brown. Cole Harris says Camden Brown playing his way into a starting role. Yeah, Christian, I think you retweeted that video of the touchdown from Finley. I mean, it's getting to the point now where, at the beginning it was a lot of hype. Kept seeing his name pop up as playmaker of the day when we were in the football complex. And now the rubber is meeting the road a little bit, and seems like this dude absolutely could be a starter for them this season.
Yeah, no, 100%. I don't know if he necessarily cracks, the first team that gets out there on Mercer, but he's going to be playing a ton at wide receiver. And, if he doesn't crack the first team, it's just because they just have so many guys at wide receiver now. But Camden has clearly established himself as a guy that will see the field a lot this fall. And it's not just because of his size. He's a good playmaker, and his size is a big part of that. But he's proven that, despite just coming in the summer, he's picked things up quickly, and he seems really smooth with it. He doesn't look lost. Some freshmen look lost out there. We haven't really seen that at all.
Yeah, Mark, Christian mentioned something we were talking about tonight. He may not be a starter, but they may rotate a bunch of guys, and it's something that Ike Hilliard, you heard him talking about that the other day. We may see 6, 8, 9 wide receivers in the actual regular rotation, especially early in the year, don't you think?
Yeah, and he's talked about putting those guys out there and let them compete, and may the best man win. And he's been pushing them hard, and he's given everybody an opportunity. And boy, he gave some really detailed information about each of the receivers when we talked to him earlier this week. So I think the players at that position really like him as their position coach. I thought that was a substandard part of the team last year. And I think there's a good possibility they're going to be better at wide receiver this year. Are they going to be great? Way too early to say that, but they're going to be better. And that's very important to the quarterbacks. Those guys need to step up to make the quarterbacks look good.
I have a question here. We're going to get into some of these. Let me scroll up. Let's see here. Hayden Harris says, did Tank struggle more of him doing too much or line not doing enough? I thought Tank supposedly did a pretty good job, but Damari Alston was one of the big standouts. Talk about Camden Brown. The other side of that in terms of true freshman was Alston, who, it'd be no shame on him or anything like that, settling in, behind Jarquez Hunter and Tank Bigsby, like, the number 3 spot for him. That's great for a true freshman. But he had 2 touchdowns tonight, and apparently, according to Brian Harsin, looked like a pretty good ball carrier with his speed on the edge too.
He's got quick feet. He's better than I thought he was going to be. I knew he was a good player. He set the record at Woodward Academy for career rushing yards, and they've been playing football there for probably about 100 years. And they have a lot of good players that come through there. The most recent example for Auburn fans to look at is Walker Kessler from that same high school. And, I think the running back situation is going to be fine. I talked to the former players, and they said, Tank Bigsby looked pretty good. They said a couple times maybe probably should have kept the ball and gone straight up the gut instead of trying to cut outside, because the defense is pretty quick. And, sometimes if it's 3rd down and 1 or 3rd down and 2, it's just best to go ahead and go for the 2 yards instead of trying to make the big play. We saw him do that some at times last year. So that'll be something to watch when the season gets going, guys.
Yeah, Wade Kemp here says here, what was Camden Brown rated coming out of high school? Christian, this was, I go to you again because you were a big Camden Brown guy, even this time last year. This is one of the ones when you look at this offensive staff, you give them 2 thumbs up in terms of evaluation. This was a guy they were on for a long time. You made it a big priority to get him to Auburn. Believe the composite had him as the number 66 receiver.
Number 66, number 435 overall, 3-star. He was rated actually even lower by 24/7 Sports as the number 1 wide receiver, or number 91 wide receiver. But, Auburn, he came to camp last June. Auburn kind of identified him then. From that point on, it was a little bit of an up and down recruitment. But Auburn circles back and seems to have won out pretty big in the end there by landing his signature away from Pitt there in December. So I mean, that was a low 3-star. That was a kid who kind of made a name for himself at Auburn's camp, and a strong senior season at St. Thomas Aquinas kind of secured things for Auburn, and you're seeing why now. I mean, he's been the guy, it seems like, that has garnered, outside of the quarterbacks, probably garnered the most attention in fall camp.
Yeah, and Christian, he's not a guy that runs 4.3, and so a lot of times if you're not a 4.3 guy, and at St. Thomas Aquinas, there's so many good players. They run the football. They're really balanced. He's not like he got thrown 700 footballs as a senior. He didn't get a ton. To get a state championship game, the biggest game of the year, and he steps up and makes a bunch of plays. And so he's one of those guys that there's no other way to put it. He's a dog. That's what he is. He is one of those guys that you look at him and you go, that guy's going to fight, claw, and scratch. And he happens to be 6'3", 200 pounds, and a big physical kid. So he's got the things you're looking for, and he got really something that they don't have. They've got kind of everything else. I think that he's got some interesting combinations to play with now. If you got that physical guy out there, Javarius Johnson or Tavares Dawson inside, the quick guys that can do it. Shedrick Jackson kind of does a little bit of both, and then all the tight ends. They got an interesting mixture of guys right now.
And then maybe Capers is going to step up too, give him a 6'4" wide receiver. He's had a good preseason, and talk about Brown. He's a guy at that camp, you could just tell he liked to go over the middle, catch the ball in traffic. He wasn't scared of anybody out there. And I don't care if he's 3 stars, 2 stars, or no stars. The guy's a player.
Yeah, certainly. Like Christian said, lots of attention for him. Lots of, the microscope is on that receivers room this fall because it's equally important for them to be consistent with the quarterback race, and he's done a good job of that so far. I want to get through just the rest of the notes here from the scrimmage from talking to Brian Harsin before we get fully into questions. Realize we haven't gone through everything yet, although I will hit on Shane Martin saying, did they say Calzada didn't play in the scrimmage? No, he did play. So let's just get that out of the way.
Yes.
Yeah, all three.
Yeah, he actually threw a touchdown pass to John Samuel Shrinker. It was about 25 yards. Shrinker caught the ball near the goal line and ran into the end zone.
There you go. And then obviously Finley, like we were talking about, Camden Brown connected with him. So Harsin pointed out, obviously those 2 freshmen. Another really big development is Anders Carlson being healthy. All indications right now seems like he'll be ready for week 1. I mean, dude was 4 for 4. Kicking the ball tonight seemed like his leg was plenty strong. He still got that brace on the left knee, obviously. Remember, he tore his ACL against Mississippi State. That was week 11 of last season. We were wondering, how they were going to use Alex McPherson, the number 1 kicker recruit. He's a true freshman. Whether he would be needed at the beginning of the year, he might be. But as of right now, Anders Carlson's their guy. Looks good out there again, 4 for 4. Harsin gave a lot of compliments to the defensive line. Of course, this is something he's joked about a couple times, saying, it's tough to be the head coach either. You want to give everybody credit, but when you're not live and a pass rusher comes in, it's hard to gauge the sacks, is what he said. But he said he felt like if it was an actual game situation, Derek Hall and Eku Leota would have had maybe a couple sacks. The final play of the scrimmage, we'll talk about this later. There's a question here already about the safety position. Craig Mcdonald, the Iowa State transfer. We saw this one, guys, as we were getting ready to go in. He picked it up, ran it. Harsin said it was about 95 yards. I don't know who ran the ball. I know Ashford was running the offense, but Harsin couldn't remember which linebacker blew up the play. But it was a scoop and score, as a goal line situational work for them, and it was a scoop and score for Craig McDonald. And I saw Colby Wooden running on the field to celebrate with him. So defense got that to close things out.
It was a Wesley Steiner. It's the A gap, and he got there before the quarterback could even hand off, and so it was like no fault on the quarterback on that play. He was toast.
Yeah, he mentioned Wesley Steiner, and I think one of the more interesting developments of the preseason has been the linebacker group. Mark wrote about him tonight. Owen Popo out there looking like Owen Popo again, but Cam Riley, Wesley Steiner, Robert Woodyard made a couple of big plays in this scrimmage, and Ryan Harsin talked a little bit about him and kind of stepping up. that linebacker group has the potential to go from a question mark to a strength because there's some talent there. It's just, they hadn't played a ton, but man, if those guys can stay healthy, that's a group that could make what's already a pretty good defense even better. And so, man, that has some exciting potential, I think, for this team.
And you even mentioned Desmond Tisdall, too, another junior
Yep.
who hasn't played a whole lot. And, earlier this week, talking to Christian Robinson, he said all the guys have actually looked pretty good. So I think he's pretty pleased with the way they're coming along. And to me, this might be one of the bigger surprises of the year if they end up being too deep and really good linebackers, and maybe even more than too deep. So that's something to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah, talent's there. And we talked to Cam Riley a couple days ago, and it was good to get his perspective. Obviously, his journey, his growth into a guy who is a pretty slender player, a quick player along the defensive front in high school, but now just a really good looking SEC linebacker this season. And he basically disclosed that he has the starting job alongside Owen Papo right now. He said one of the starting jobs. The linebackers will rotate a lot. But he said, as the starter, I need to know the playbook pretty well.
Yeah, I think he's a guy that gives you a little something different. I think Wesley Steiner's probably more of a true kind of middle linebacker guy, and Owen's kind of playing that role too. Cam Riley gives you a 6'4", almost 6'5", rangy, kind of a downhill guy, and it's a little bit, they're not really anybody else like that at the position. So I think that's a big advantage for him.
If I'm blitzing, I'm pleased to have both him and Papo out there to get after quarterbacks, because those guys are A-plus athletes, guys.
Yeah, Papo, that was one thing Harsin touched on was, this is the first time in a offense versus defense type of setting, whether it was a scrimmage or what have you, where they've had Owen Papo back from that injury. Obviously, he didn't participate in the spring, and Harsin said, look, Owen looked like Owen out there, and we know he made a good tackle in space against Tank Bigsby, and he's just overall, like Mark said, when you've got your 5-star senior, probably going to be a future NFL player, team captain of last season. I mean, it goes on and on for Owen Papo. You can't talk any higher about his impact for the defense, and that's what Cam Riley said too. As beneficial as it was for him to get those reps in the spring, which that's something he seemed pretty excited about when he was when it was brought up, saying, yeah, that was really big for me. It's, again, you can't replace a guy like Owen Papo. So I think we've run through here. I'm looking the main stuff. I think we'll get through the rest of it if we'll go through questions here. So if you guys have any, again, if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, thanks for tuning in, and we'll get some here. So Gerard Pruitt asks, what did Ashford look like today? I know he's a running threat, but it's hard to show that element when the quarterbacks aren't live. Yeah, Christian, that's something where this has been we've known how athletic Robbie Ashford is, and he's had a chance to show it occasionally. But you have to wonder how many more big scrambles he would have had between A-Day, between this scrimmage, some of the other work we've seen him do. So it'll be interesting to see once he actually is allowed to be live, what kind of athlete he is in the open field. And as we understand it, that was again the case today. He's a guy that's a lot slipperier, slipperier, I don't think is a word, than the other two guys.
Yeah, no, that's something like when we go and we would have the different media viewing windows and stuff like that, he might be the most erratic in terms of sometimes you'll have some incredible throws, sometimes they're not as incredible, but he's just not necessarily a practice quarterback. You get him in this setting, in a scrimmage, in a game or whatnot, and he's a guy he's going to go out there and make plays. And, Harsin talked about it. He was asked about it afterwards. Is it tough for you as a coach when you can't, the quarterback can't get hit, you can't go live, and you have a guy like Robbie that can do that? And Harsin was like, yeah, it is kind of tough. But it seemed like Robbie had a pretty successful scrimmage overall. One of the things that kind of stuck out to me was on that 95-yard scoop and score. I mean, Robbie almost tracked him down.
Yeah, he tried to get him.
His speed. Yeah. Robbie almost got all the way back there to Craig. So that just kind of showed off his speed a little bit, but he definitely had, overall, I think he did pretty good repping with the 2s and the 3s there a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard. I think back to 2010, and Gus Malzahn, Gene Chizik didn't really have any idea what they had in Cam Newton until they put him on the field, and he did enough to win the starting job without the running and without the scrambling, without the live quarterback stuff. But it's an added dimension that it's there. And so you kind of, Mark, you kind of have to think about it going out. Well, I know what we would get from that side, but you heard Harsin tonight. The one thing that Robbie Ashford doesn't have a ton of is real quarterback experience. Had a couple of injuries in high school, a couple of years at Oregon, hadn't played. He just doesn't have a ton of quarterback play under his belt. And so that's just a hard thing to overcome sometimes. And so, it's that leadership, leading the team, kind of decision making, all those things that it's just, he just doesn't have as much, practical work as some of those other guys right now.
Another reason for that too is he was a really good baseball player in high school, and he tried to play baseball too at Oregon and played a little bit. So he never concentrated full time on football and being a quarterback. And, reminds me back when Nick Marshall was competing for the quarterback job, and he couldn't do his full thing at all in these type of scrimmages. And they actually had one scrimmage let him go live. And after they saw him do that, they decided he needed to play quarterback.
Yeah, and then he had no more live scrimmages for him because he didn't need any more. But I think Robbie's a guy, the more reps he gets, I think he's got an opportunity to improve maybe more than any of the other guys because of that, just that natural ability. It's just a matter of getting more reps for him.
All right. AU for Life asks, how are the safeties looking? Yes, this is turning out to be a pretty interesting competition here between, believe the most likely content. We haven't heard a lot about Caleb Wooden. I know he's in the mix there, but when we've seen the first team work, it's been mostly Craig McDonald and mostly Caden Bridges, who Brian Harsin said tonight, big athlete. I mean, a guy who's going to be a good player for them in the future. Does he have it all there right now to be able to compete with a guy like McDonald, who's had a couple seasons of production there in the Big 12? Not sure. But on the flip side, Mark, talking about how good of an athlete Caden Bridges is, seems like Craig McDonald is pretty good coming back from that ankle injury, considering, again, he was able to run the fumble all the way back down the field. So that's one of those where I feel like, there is going to be a starter on the depth chart, but similar to, like by Darius Knighton and Zion Puckett last season at safety. Seems like both of those guys are going to get in that rotation in the secondary.
Yeah, I think the secondary's got a chance to be pretty good. Losing Smoke Monday, but they've said a lot of good things, the coaches and other players, about Zion Puckett as a leader back there, a guy who really understands football. And, he missed spring practice. He was very limited what he could do because of a shoulder problem, but he's healthy now, ready to go. Craig McDonald obviously must be healthier than he was a couple weeks ago, because he took that thing back 95 yards on the scoop and score play. And he's a big safety. And that's one thing that sort of stands out to me. They do have some big guys back there. They also have some length at cornerback too. So, on the subject of defensive backs, one guy we need to mention is Keante Scott. I understand he made a really good play, reflecting a pass, and he just generally looked good out there. And Keante Scott probably doesn't even know where all the classroom buildings are that he's going to be in this next week. So he's just got in town, and he's a guy that was real highly ranked by 24/7, and so far he's showing why.
Yeah, just on Craig McDonald real quick. I remember, I think I was with Jason in the complex early in June when those guys first reported, and he walked in. We're like, who is that? Because he looked like a linebacker. He's I think he's like 6'2" or something like that, but he looks almost like a linebacker out there.
Yeah, he's a big dude. When you look at him, and you're right. He had mentioned Zion Puckett. Zion Puckett to me almost is the given right now. Nathan, I think when you're talking about that, we're talking about the other positions. Zion Puckett's a guy that's a leader back there. I think he's taken over Caden Bridges, and and you look at him and Craig McDonald. I think we'll see both those guys. Caden Bridges, another baseball player, really good athlete that's kind of come on strong and done some things. So, it is, Nathan. It's an interesting dynamic, and I think the one constant. I won't say one constant. I think there's think there's three constants right now in this secondary: Nehemiah Pritchett, Jalen Simpson, and Donovan Kaufman. Donovan Kaufman has become a guy that I think no matter what style of team they play, Donovan Kaufman is going to be on the field. If they're playing a physical team, he'll be the nickel. If they're playing a team that might throw more, he may slide back and play a true safety spot. But he's definitely a guy that I feel like is come into his own as one of the leaders of this defense.
Yeah, video idea. Track Keante Scott, I guess, with a GoPro on his first day in the Haley Center. That
would be fantastic. Yes,
and see how that goes. Get the
but muted. You'd have to mute the sound. But yeah, because if you could do that with just about anybody, and it would be just a whirling dervish of stuff.
Have they? I feel like have they done that before? Like freshmen in the Haley Center? Because I mean, good Lord, my first day in there, I can remember was
video and GPS because you need both of them.
Yeah, and like track their pathing.
Yes.
But anyway, Daniel Owen asks, "Is there still a lot of rotation at guard?" Yeah, a couple more guys that need to be pointed out. We've talked about Tate Johnson a lot. Am I mistaken? Was he getting first team reps at center?
Center. Yeah. They were doing some different things tonight, but Tate Johnson in at center. The maybe the biggest surprise for me tonight was Brian Harsin talking about Brendan Coffey, saying he's been both at tackle and guard. Brendan Coffey looks like a wrestler. I mean, he looks like a dude that you could just throw him in the ring right now, and he's another one of those guys. If you go, man, the light comes on, he could be special. But you got Keandre Jones, Brandon Council, Alec Jackson, Cam Stutz, Jaleel Irvin, Tate Johnson, and now Brendan Coffey. That's a big group of offensive line. And James Murray asking how did the O-line do? It's probably a mixed bag, to be quite honest, because there is you're rolling a first offense, a second offense, a third offense, kind of mixing in and out. It's hard to get in a rhythm, and we talked about it. It's so important for that offensive line group to build a cohesive group. That's impossible until you kind of settle in on a group, and they're not anywhere close to that right now.
Brian Harsin did mention he liked what he saw with some of the combination blocks and some of the cohesion from the group out there. So, from what I was told, overall, the interior of the defensive front outplayed the interior of the offensive front. So that's good news for Jimmy Brumbaugh because he's got a lot of guys he's testing out in there, including a guy who he saw at Oregon last year, Jason Jones, who's a supersized nose guard in there. And, if Jason Jones steps up and plays to his potential, that's going to definitely help the defense this year because, if he requires a double team to root him out there on interior run plays, that's going to leave some really talented guys on the edge, some opportunities to make plays.
Yeah, and speaking of guys on the edge, question we'll get down to here just says Dylan Brooks. And yeah, I mean, that's something that we posted a while ago, was that he was dealing with a little bit of an ailment at the beginning of camp. Had to work his way back physically to kind of get over that. But heard he's working back in just fine. He was a participant tonight, and like Brian Harsin mentioned, everybody's a go right now. I mean, there are no serious injuries for this team, which if you're talking about a team that, maybe is not expected to do super well, the expectations aren't super high. If you're going to try to reach that ceiling, if you're going to try to, push past those expectations, we've seen it time and time again with Auburn over the past few years, even obviously last season, got to be healthy to give yourself a chance. And right now they're checking all those boxes. And yeah, Dylan Brooks is fine. He's worked his way back, and he's back in that rotation right now.
A good example of that for the guys who've been around watching Auburn a long time, the 1993 Auburn team, very low expectations. They almost started the exact same lineup every single game, didn't lose a game, won a lot of tight games because they were as healthy as a college football team can be. Go really old school, 1972 team was really downplayed after the Pat Sullivan graduated in 71, All-American Terry Beasley, and a lot of really other talented guys were gone. That team had an attitude that, hey, we're pretty good. They ended up losing just one game. And a big reason for that was the key guys stayed healthy the whole season.
Yeah, and like we talked about it, I mean, who knows what would have happened at the end of last year? One play here or there obviously were the reason for them losing some of those games, but that losing streak started. If you had Bo Nix against in the Iron Bowl in that game, obviously TJ Finley was injured in that game, so it's a great sort of starting point for Auburn right now, getting things kicked off in fall camp. Looking here, Cameron Heron asked, would you be surprised if TJ Finley started over Zach Calzada? Would not be surprised at any of these guys right now, but certainly wouldn't be surprised at Finley. Now, I think all three of these guys have a legitimate shot, and that's something we're learning over the course of camp. It seems like Finley's doing the best, like you talked about, Jason. Right now, I'm still with you in sort of your thought process from maybe like a week ago when we were on here, that it's seeming more and more like you're gonna have a couple guys, not just a package situation. You're gonna have a couple guys running this offense against Mercer. It just seems in all likelihood like that.
Yeah, I think you're gonna try to get in that first game and just see what the guys look like with the lights on and with everything kind of live and coming at you. So yeah, I think they'll have an idea of like who our starter is, but it's going to be written in pencil, I think, until you see what's going on. I absolutely think TJ Finley could be the starter. And we talked about this earlier. I don't know how many times you can count, but it'd take more than one hand to count quarterbacks that people gave up on that wound out being really good players. You don't have to go that far back either. There's been quite a few of them. I don't know. One of the biggest examples is Ben Leard. He was given up for dead. Early on in his career, a game against Virginia, and then looked up and man, without a couple of injuries, Ben Leard would have put together one of the best seasons in Auburn history for a quarterback. His senior season. So it's happens at every position. It doesn't happen a whole lot at quarterback because usually when you move on to the next guy, that it's hard for that other guy to get a shot. TJ Finley's having another shot, and we'll see if he can make the most of it.
Look, if you asked me a week ago if I was surprised that TJ Finley could be the starter, I would probably honestly say yeah.
Yeah.
You asked me that now after the first scrimmage, not surprised at all.
No, it's crazy how much things can change, but that's why you go through camp, and all of the things that Harsin said today that are in Jason's story about TJ Finley, him discussing that it's not always what goes on in terms of a completion or looking at guys' numbers from a scrimmage. It's about getting guys aligned, and he had this lengthy example about something that happened in the scrimmage. Didn't name who it was. Do not think it was TJ Finley based on the context of that answer. Saying that come out of the huddle, running back is on the wrong side, and whomever was at quarterback didn't really notice and just took the snap, started the play. All of a sudden, the play is completely out of whack because you might try to hand off one way, the running back's not even on that side. It's kind of a broken play, and so little things like that. We know the attention to detail, the kind of coach that Harsin is in that regard. Little things like that add up over the course of a preseason camp. And if a guy like Finley has been the most accurate in practice so far, and he's a guy who has the best, operates the offense the best in that regard, and has everybody lined up, and does the best job of making other people successful other than just himself, that stuff starts to matter over the course of camp. And so obviously will be really interesting once we get back to the practice field next week, to see if these reps get changed at all. Again, we're expecting that to be more of the case probably by the second scrimmage. These guys will all be given a continued opportunity, I think, over the next week. Hit on this one really quickly because I don't know if Anthony Grant was in here earlier, but he asked, did Keante Scott make any noise today? Pretty excited about him. Yes. Something that we had heard was that Mark was talking about a good play he made in individual coverage. Just have heard good things about him from the start of camp overall. Joe Rudolph asks, what was the biggest surprise from today? I don't know if hearing that Finley ran the offense well is a huge surprise because he's been doing that so far.
I think Mark talked about it earlier. to me, it's probably Damari Alston kind of.
That's what I was just
Yeah, that's good.
Play, with Camden Brown, we've heard running backs. It's almost impossible to kind of get a feel till you get in a scrimmage because they're not tackling you, you're not live. But to see him shake and bake a couple times, make somebody miss, and get into the second level and do those things, that's a huge deal. And my guess is that this Auburn coaching staff feels pretty darn good about Damari Alston and Camden Brown after scrimmage number 1. They got to be smiling, going, "Hey, we got a couple of guys right there."
Yeah, and it's not like he was just gifted running back 3 either. You have Sean Jackson there as well, who has looked pretty solid so far in fall camp. So he's kind of had to earn. Damari has had to kind of earn that spot, and he did that tonight.
Yeah, talking to Cadillac, I think it's interesting kind of breaking down those 2 guys for that third running back spot. Might see both of them just because their play styles are so different. Sean Jackson is a guy that we saw a lot of in the spring when Jarquez Hunter wasn't available and Damari wasn't on campus yet. Sort of just a bowling ball at running back, and he got some burn last season. I believe he had a touchdown against Alabama State. So I think you'll see both of those guys take over, per se for Sean Shivers with him transferring out. Excuse me. Danny Malone asks, Landon King, Christian, this question's for you. Landon King, any plays made? Did not hear much about Landon tonight. This is something that we were talking about the other day at the viewing window, Christian. It seems like, and I was trying to ask Ike Hilliard about this, and I think he took the question in another direction. That's okay. But I think their usage of Landon is an ongoing process in terms of them figuring out what to do with him. Because, like you mentioned, in the slot, you've got, VAR and Tavares Dawson are the guys that you want to be using right now. Using him as a mismatch, that's one thing. It's not necessarily as easy as just saying there's a smaller guy to betting and put him out in the slot. I think that's something where maybe even the first few games of the season we're going to start to see that evolve for the coaching staff, them kind of figure out what they want to do with him, because he does have such a unique skill set. You want to use him. I'm not sure if they have a 100% grasp on that at the moment.
Is Nathan lagging for you guys, or is that just me?
Yeah, he's sort of fading out with me too.
Yeah, but
Okay.
we get him back. Yeah. We're good. We can keep talking. He'll find us here eventually.
I just want to make sure that wasn't me.
No, you're good.
No, the thing with Landon is, you definitely have to kind of figure out a different way to use him. One of the different pace drills, might have been Wednesday. I think it was from Wednesday's practice, was, he's been kind of working at slot as kind of a big slot. And, they work their way down the field with VAR and Tavares. And kind of once they got into the red zone, that's where Landon came in. So you have a couple different areas you can get involved. The red zone is definitely it. I think with Landon, especially running more wide receiver routes, he's probably not going to be a guy that he's not going to be on the field consistently this fall. He's not going to get reps a ton necessarily, but they'll bring him in for certain situations and they'll be looking for him in those situations because they know it can be a mismatch there.
Y'all got me now?
Yep.
Yeah, we got you. One of the things that you have to watch for and that be careful of is, we saw it last year. It became, and it didn't really matter a couple of times, but we've seen in the past with Gus Malzahn offenses where after about 2 or 3 games of doing that, then you got to figure out a way to use a guy more than only bringing him in when you throw the football. Mark, I remember 96, 97. No, I take that back. It was 94 Auburn. 94 Auburn, Frank Sanders, Thomas Bailey. When Frank Sanders, Thomas Bailey were on the field, they absolutely would throw the football. When they took those guys off the field, it was a run 99.9% of the time. And, that's some of the things that you have to figure out as part of Landon. Can they figure out a way to get him involved in the offense? Now, he should be a guy that can be a much better blocker for you if you put him in a slot and you're going to run the football and do some things. And so if you could do that, get him on the field a little more, but it's a deep room. It's a really deep room. And all of a sudden you go think, oh, we got to have Landon King, to now going, where does Landon King fit? Because, you got a pretty deep tight end room, and now all of a sudden you got a pretty deep wide receiver room in terms of numbers.
See, next one here. Lawrence Robinson. Do y'all think Asante, talking about Eugene Asante, the linebacker transfer from North Carolina, catches up enough to be able to contribute? Yeah, so something that Brian Harsin has disclosed a couple times now this preseason is that Eugene Asante missed some time in the spring after the passing of his father. He's away from the team for a little bit, but everything Brian Harsin has talked about is that he's done a really good job sort of playing catch up. That's catch up. He only missed a little bit of time, but getting back in there and getting on the same page with everybody else. And I think absolutely he has an opportunity to. Mark, you talked about that linebacker rotation. We've seen him get some work, I think, mostly with the second team so far. Maybe Wesley Steiner and Cam Riley have the experience edge within the system at Auburn, and overall they've been playing the past couple seasons. But I would not be surprised to see Asante be that maybe number 4 linebacker, which we've seen that player in Auburn's system over the past couple of years get more than enough contribution within the defense.
Yeah, Christian Robinson told me he's absolutely going to play. He said he likes him. He's making progress. He's catching up from the time he missed in the spring. And he actually on Thursday went out with at the start of practice on the 11-on-11. He was running with the ones on Thursday. Now they switched that stuff up during practice, but that's a good sign for Eugene Asante.
Let's see here. Blake Pipkin. Is Calzada pretty much out of the race at this point?
No.
No, we're still rolling.
Number one. I mean, we've talked about it. I do feel like it's 3-man. I mean, I don't think that Harsin mentioned Holden Gerner tonight, and so I think we figured it's going to be that way. I mean, you can't have a 4-man quarterback battle. It's 3 now, and here sooner rather than later, it's probably going to be down to 2. Now Zach Calzada's in there again. I think the time he missed in the spring. And you can do all the reps you want to in the summer and do all those things. There's no substitute for getting scrimmage reps in the offense you're playing in, and he doesn't really have any of those. So he's in the mix. Heck, I mean, if you still said, hey, lay odds on who the starter's going to be, he still might be the favorite.
I'd still probably pick him.
And so but TJ Finley. I think what he did tonight was tell people I'm not going away. So I think that's where we are after scrimmage number 1.
Yeah, and like Jason said, like that makes it all the more impressive if a guy not named him wins that job. It's either Robbie Ashford or maybe in a little bit more likelihood Zach Calzada, knowing that TJ Finley has now it's kind of indisputable that he has stepped up a good bit this fall and made things really, really interesting at the quarterback position. Chip Johnson said, based on camp so far in the scrimmage, could you guys see Eku Leota playing himself into a 2nd to 4th round draft pick? Absolutely has the opportunity to do that. I think right now you'd probably, if he puts up the same exact numbers, maybe like 5th, 6th, 7th round guy. But yeah, I mean, if he and Derek Hall have another really good season, if he approaches double-digit sacks with the kind of stage he has now at Auburn Christian, he's pretty underrated last year with the ability that he came on. He took advantage when TD Moultrie was away from the team for a couple weeks. He took full advantage of that. I mean, we've talked about it a couple times. This is one of the better pass rushing duos in the SEC right now.
Yeah, I would probably lean in terms of draft closer to that 4th, probably like 3rd, 4th. I think 3rd is maybe the highest you would see him. I mean, maybe he has an incredible season and surpasses that. You don't really know, but it just kind of an interesting thing too, just on the edges is, if Derek and Eku have the seasons that we think they can, and you need to bring in replacements for them, it'll be pretty easy to do that because you're going to have a ton of success. You can show guys, whether it's high school guys or guys in the portal, that say, hey, come on in and do this for us. And that's not hard to sell. Might
you be talking about Quay Russaw, I wonder? Be able to show him that. Be able to show him that over the course of the season. Let's see. Get to a few more here. Hayden Harris asks, given the situation, do they try to run or throw more in these scrimmages, or is it a balance? Based off the notes, I get the feeling that they threw it more. This is a situational, like Brian Harsin was saying. What he means by that is, setting up different game situations, whether it's red zone, whether it's, certain amount of time left on the clock, whether it's, trying to get your special teams in a good position. Seemed like there was plenty of running the ball today. Yeah. Again, that's something that they got to figure out with that offensive line too, making sure that they're in a good spot to do that, because that's going to be their bread and butter this season before they can worry about the quarterback competition at all.
Yeah, it wasn't a 70-30 run. but I think you'd have to consider this one was probably a little bit more run than pass. I think that Ryan Harsin said it as a goal. They wanted to run the football. They wanted to kind of be physical, and that's kind of normal mode for a first scrimmage. You get out there and go, you want to hit a little bit, especially because you're probably playing more young guys in a first scrimmage than you will in scrimmage too. Because we hadn't really mentioned that, but this is, you mentioned Damari Alston, Camden Brown. This was massive for them to make an impact in scrimmage number one, because sometimes if you don't make an impact in scrimmage number one, then you don't get a chance in scrimmage number two, because they're starting to narrow things down. And so they wanted to run the football. They wanted to be physical. And, this is where, that offensive line especially, you got to, we probably run through, I don't know, they got a bunch of guys on the offensive line. You got to get it down to 8 or 9 guys and go, okay, who are we leaning on? Who's it going to be? Because, it's an impossibility to people have always wanted to, the old message board when it's always been, hey, why don't they rotate the offensive line? It just doesn't happen. Coaches don't do that for a reason. You're going to play a group of guys together. You might rotate 1 or 2 guys, but so I think it's running the football was a point of emphasis tonight.
Here you go, Mark. Says, as someone whose grandparents were original ITAT subscribers, how fast can Mark find a 1983 magazine in his office? We'll clock you.
Maybe about 30 seconds.
There you go.
So if you want original first year, just look over his shoulder, because they're in the covers are in the frame right up there behind him. So
yeah, that's 81.
81.
Yeah.
There you go. Chris asks, sorry if this has already been asked. I'm late to the party. How did Camden Brown look?
Real good.
Good. A+. We talked about it at the start of the show, Chris, but him and Damari Alston were singled out by Harsin as having really good days. We know that Camden had a touchdown catch from TJ Finley.
And a toe tap by the video that we found on Twitter too. So yeah, good play at the back end of the end zone.
Yes. Good throw, good catch, all that kind of stuff. Until proven otherwise, Camden Brown is your fall camp standout, just on both sides of the ball. He's your guy right now. Let's see. When is the next scrimmage? The next scrimmage is on Friday, like we've been talking about. That one's gonna be pretty darn important, because after that, your time starts to whittle down. And like Harsin mentioned today, like after that, you're not too far removed from. I mean, we're close, y'all. We're 2 weeks away from week 0. After that, you're not too far removed from getting ready for Mercer. Like it's that time.
It's going to be Friday afternoon too, so it's going to be an afternoon scrimmage. Obviously, Ryan Harsin, Davis Harsin plays at Auburn High School, and they play in Montgomery Friday night. So I think they'll scrimmage on Friday afternoon. That'll give him a chance to go watch Davis and the Auburn Tigers play Hoover on Friday night in Montgomery, and so that should work out well for our plans to go watch a little high school football too. So looking forward to an afternoon scrimmage. Hopefully, it won't be too bad.
Speaking of high school football, Christian, I'll let you just take some time here, because I don't think we're going to have a devoted podcast for it, just because we'll get back rolling into fall camp. But tell us a little bit about Auburn's newest 2023 commitment, a guy who, watching your video, always love to see those kinds of commitments. It was an emotional day for J.C. Hart, a guy who's been big on Auburn for a long time, and a guy who seems like he could be a pretty good player in the long run.
Yeah, we'll touch on him for a second, and then I'll really let Jason and Mark take over, because they were the first ones really out of anybody to kind of interview him and write a story on him, dating back all the way to last summer. But, I mean, people will say, oh, only a 3-star. He's playing 1A football, and he has the size, he has the speed, he has what you're looking for out of a potential cornerback. He has NFL size and NFL speed at cornerback. He has the stuff that you just simply can't teach. You simply can't teach what J.C. Hart has. And look, you saw it on the video. This is a kid that absolutely loves Auburn. His coach said it. He's not coming to play for Harsin. He's not coming to play for Zach Etheridge. He's coming to play for Auburn, because he loves Auburn, and he's loved Auburn since he was a little kid. And so that's a kid that he's going to come in and he's going to fight for his school every single day. You need kids like that in every recruiting class. You need those kids, and J.C. Hart is one of them.
Yeah. And for people, I think people might understand it if they're from Auburn, they grew up in Auburn. But even if you just went to school here, or if you're from, if you don't understand how close Lochapoka is to Auburn, it is rock throwing distance, especially from my house. I live on the far west side of Auburn, and from my doorstep to his school is about 8 minutes, and it's that close. Talking to Coach Rico Newton, his coach, and he's like, hey, the kid, hey, Mom, when we're driving by the stadium, can we stop and see the stadium? That's how he grew up. And so, I don't know. The thing about this one is, Jeff Klein, former Auburn quarterback who tragically passed away just a few months ago. Jeff Klein last summer says, hey, I got a guy. I was like, okay, that always makes me, go, okay, let's stand up, because those guys, when you've been there before, you know what it looks like. And so, we see J.C. Hart, meet him in the summer, and go, he's going to have a chance. And he's gone from having a chance to grasping it by getting stronger and getting faster. He's faster than he was last summer, even though he's a little bigger now. He's not a bodybuilder yet, but when you put him, Mark, we've seen it time and time again. And hey, Nehemiah Pritchett's a perfect example. I remember Walt McFadden and others. You put guys in college and put them in a strength and conditioning program and a training table and do those things, Mark. J.C. Hart's a guy that's going to be 190 pounds and is going to run a 4.3 and going to be a guy that has a chance. And if all he ever is a special teams guy that loves Auburn and would do anything for the program, he's worth one of your 85 just because of what he brings to the table.
And I think he's going to be a lot more than that, Jason. That camp between his sophomore and junior years, I saw him stand out. He was definitely one of the very best players on the field, and he wasn't very old at that time. And when I talked to him, I could tell how articulate he is. He told me he was above 4.0 grade point average. He's got offers from at least 3 Ivy League schools, and he's got good genes. His dad, Corey, was a stud player at Lochapoka High School who played for the Marshall Thundering Herd. So, to me, this is a no-brainer. Take kids like this. Auburn needs to have kids like this on the roster to reach its potential. And I wouldn't be shocked if he turns out to be one of the better players on the team.
Hey, I tell you what, they got a couple more players on that team too. People, if you hop in on a Lochapoka game this year, he's not the only guy on that team. They're gonna have some guys that are fun to watch.
Hey, AU, oh goodness, don't know how to pronounce that. I will take the compliment of, has anyone seen Nathan King and Trey Lindsey in the same place at the same time? He's a good looking dude. You have? It's true. It's true at multiple football events. Yeah. Unfortunately. Sorry to break your hope there. But yeah, guys, I think we'll cut it off there. We're 53 minutes. I think I've seen all of us yawn once individually over the last.
Yeah, a couple of times for me.
I think I've racked up close to 10 now.
Christian is slumped. He's almost out of here. But we appreciate everybody for tuning in. I think I said this a couple weeks ago. We had 100. We were hovering around 100 viewers between Facebook and YouTube together, and that was the most we had ever. And I've ever done this. Y'all, we've been around 250 this whole time. So everybody excited about Scrimmage, and hope you guys will be equally excited for the season as it continues to get closer. Hope everybody enjoys these. And we also said it a couple weeks ago, our goal of getting 4,000 subscribers on our YouTube channel. We are really close to 3.9. So if y'all enjoyed this, go hit the subscribe button. Also, that way you don't have to worry about figuring out next time we go live. You'll be notified. Just subscribe and hit the little bell icon. That way you guys will know next time we're talking about Auburn football fall camp. And so thank you guys so much for watching. If you're listening to this podcast on probably Sunday or Monday, thank you guys so much for listening. If you guys enjoyed it, go leave us a 5-star review. That's the number one thing that helps us out. The intro and outro music, as always, by Beats by Mordecai, who I saw in person in Atlanta a few days ago. That was fun. So go give him a follow on Twitter, SoundCloud, or Instagram, and we will catch you guys the next episode, the beginning of next week. So everybody have a good rest of the weekend. Talk to y'all soon.